So I was originally going to wait until this story was finished, but we had to end the session mid-encounter, and the follow-up session had already been postponed twice. The relevant characters are the Goliath barbarian Uther and my tiefling wizard Timmery, who was introduced mid-dungeon crawl by running down a hallway screaming. There's a couple others, but they aren't particularly relevant right now. We'd run into a troublesome couple of beasties. Well, we saw them wipe the floor with the creatures that had already been irritating, and poor Uther had about 6 HP. I decided that given his fragile state, he might appreciate being able to avoid the front line for once. So I cast Dragon's Breath on him. It reads as, shoved an apocalyptically hot chili pepper down his throat, with the only explanation of, quote, chew, swallow, don't bake the kitty cat. Uther, being as strong as a mountain, but with about the same brain power, turned around to ask, what the hell? Not realizing that he exhaled fire. So he breathed a 15-foot cone of, ow, that's hot, right in my face. Luckily, he rolled low for damage. I succeeded my save and have resistance, though only took 2 damage and lost concentration. I basically just extinguished the tip of my horn, looked at Uther and said, you're supposed to breathe towards them, imbecile. However, Uther, having breathed fire, starts remembering bad things and has a panic attack, essentially falling useless on the floor. I blew a spell slot giving fire breath to the guy who's afraid of fire. And as mad as my character might be about it, all the players, including me and the DM, nearly fell over laughing. Hello everyone. I wanted to share with you all the story of Perry P, the halfling NPC, and how he became one of the most iconic and hated characters in my playgroup's campaign. It's a long story, so buckle up. A little backstory first. I'm a fairly rookie GM and wanted to try this 5e campaign with 3 of my close friends. I created this very homebrew heavy world, taking inspiration from Magic the Gathering universe and some fantasy literature I like. There is a large main continent with 3 kingdoms where the story takes place and another small island-like continent. As for the 3 players, their characters are all multi-classed, 2 classes, because they wanted to learn and experience multi-classing. One of them already had some experience in D&D and was playing an elf monk fighter named Malishro. The other 2 were rookies, one playing an half-elf rogue bard named Dustin, and the other a tiefling cleric warlock named Lilith. Dustin's player also controlled a half-orc barbarian named Vinicus, working as his bodyguard and partner in crime. The party of the level 5s decided to get a house carriage, paid with the money Dustin had made from his heists. This house carriage is huge, needing 8 horses to pull it, and also served as the shop for Dustin to sell his stolen goods and items the party found during their adventures. The party needed someone to take care of the house carriage while they were out adventuring. While crossing the border to another kingdom, they stopped by a small town and found the perfect person for the job. The son of a local innkeeper, a young, snotty-nosed halfling with pale skin and curly brown hair named Perry P. Perry P, or PP as we like to call him, I know, it sounds funny, knew how to clean and cook and wanted to see the world. So the party made a deal with the innkeeper. They would take care of her son on their adventures, and he would take care of the house carriage for them. Everything was going fine until Dustin being the bastard son of one of the kings of the kingdoms, and also being a sneaky evil rogue bard with a superiority complex, started to boss PP around. This bossing around started to escalate to the point to where it was downright abuse. Every time PP would talk back, the more and more abuse would follow. Lilith and Melishro also tried to soothe the conflicts, but Dustin always ended up using Vinicus, the menacing half-orc, as a trump card to intimidate PP. This intimidation made PP wet his pants on several occasions. PP left the prison of his small town for the prison of having to live with Dustin. That is, until one day he disappeared. The story progressed without him till the party had to participate in a tournament, fighting inside a massive arena to obtain information and rewards from Rakdos, a demon guild leader, Guild of Rakdos from Master Guild's Guide of Ravnica. The party progressed in the tournament, winning the increasingly difficult battles until they had to face Rakdos' champion. To the party's surprise, the champion was none other than PP. But somehow PP was different. His eyes lacked the fear they once had, and instead burned with anger and revenge. His right arm was no longer human, but instead a mass of pulsating flesh covered in eyes, held together by eldritch tentacles and tendrils. After the difficult fight, and when the party thought they defeated PP, a portal opened up below his limp body. From that portal, eldritch tentacles erupted, dragging the halfling's body. The portal increased in size, now covering the entire fighting pit as more tentacles appeared, attacking everything around them. The arena is evacuated, however. Across the city of Ravnica, more portals keep appearing, and more eldritch tentacles ravage everything around them. The whole of the city is in chaos, and the guild leaders have to intervene. The portals ended up closing, and the city is in shambles. While helping with the city rebuilding, the party finds clues to PP's betrayal. Following those clues, they find out PP is still alive and eventually manage to locate his whereabouts. But what they found was no longer PP. The little halfling lost all of his humanity in exchange for power. His body, or should I say its body, was a mass of whitish purple flesh covered in maddening eyes. His limbs replaced by long eldritch tentacles, and only his face remained the same. But his eyes that once showed fear, then burned with anger, now look hollow and devoid of life. His once calm yet bratty voice now sounded like wailing screams of pain. After finally putting the poor halfling out of his misery for the good or the worse, Melishro, Lilith, Vinicus, and especially Dustin hope they never have to face PP ever again. The party hated the character ever since. The players hated the character ever since. And even I, the DM that created him, started to hate that character a little bit. So this has been in the making for almost a year now. Let us start with some backstory. I started this D&D game at work for my coworkers. We decided to run the Tomb of Annihilation. It took us over a year. The guide force, as they came to call themselves, saved the world from Akarak and the Soulmonger. After they completed the story, they wanted to continue with their characters, and I was excited to try some higher level gameplay, so I gave them the year-long time skip to let them build their characters. Our Minotaur barbarian, Morrow, decided that he wanted to spend part of his time tracking down and killing a dragon. so I ran a solo session with him to find out what happens. He put together a crew and went after an adult blue dragon. He had built a very optimized character, and the fight was relatively quick. The dragon got off one breath attack. He was able to get off multiple brutal crits. With the dragon disposed of, it was time to roll for loot. I decided to go for full random loot, so I calculated the CR for the dragon and minions and rolled right then and there at the table. He got a lot of golden gems, and I mean a lot. He was able to basically fund the party from this one battle. We then looked at what magic items he's got. There were several, but the important was that he got a luck blade. When I rolled to see what kind of weapon it was, it rolled as a dagger. Then I rolled 1d4 to see how many wishes it had. I rolled a 4. They had all 3 wishes. He used 2 of them immediately. The first to remove the curse of +3 staff of shrinking he had gained in the Tomb of Annihilation, and the second to give him a 4th attunement slot. I allowed that since I was using the Taldori campaign guide, and that is one of the available feats. He kept the 3rd one in his back pocket and never told the group. Over the next several months, as the party went through the Underdark fighting beings of living darkness, there was trouble brewing on the surface. Unbeknownst to the group, there was another player in the game. My friend was setting up and playing as their next villain, and when they came back from the surface, they were ready. They had no idea what they were in for. The number of tricks and traps my friend had put into this evil druid's grove was ridiculous. As we put it, it was a magical Vietnam, and the trees were speaking Elven. In the first major clash in the druid's grove, the party was stretched thin. They had already had many fights and needed a rest. During the battle, the barbarian got banished and left the group alone for a minute. During that time, the party's druid was killed. Hidden by the dense undergrowth, the party was unable to see one of the enemies place a stone underneath their fallen comrade. With some good rolls, though, the group was able to pull it back and win the battle. The party's bard cast Magnificent Mansion, and all got ready for a well-deserved rest. In the mansion, they spent the night, and the next day they got ready for a resurrection ritual. They had heartfelt speeches to the deceased, and rolled well on their checks. It was a beautiful thing. It was then that the trap snapped. The stone was a glyph of warding with a counterspell. The resurrection didn't happen. The group had no choice but to try again. Sadly, this time the rolls were not very good, and the resurrection failed. The druid was lost. This hit Morrow hard. His and the druid's backstory were intertwined. She was the one who saved him from the slavery of a group of hags. She was his oldest friend, and he saw red. It was at this point he knew what he had to do. I was not prepared for what my player did. As the rest of the group was trying to figure out if there was a way to still bring back the druid, if there was anyone they could find to cast True Resurrection, Morrow spoke. He said,
"I pull out the dagger. A dagger with 3 emeralds inlaid in the handle, 2 of which are cracked. You see the 3rd one crack, and there is a blast of magical energy that comes out of the dagger. In my mind, I make my wish."
And this is what he said.
Morrow thinks in his head about the exact space the guide force was in right before they entered the mansion. All life within 80 miles of that exact space instantly ceases to exist.
We were all shocked at what happened and what the long-lasting ramifications of this decision would be. Teal dear, Barbarian has a wish in his pocket. When his best friend in the group dies, he sets off an 80-mile wide nuke to make sure that people that killed her are dead.